Well, this is exciting. I've got a brand new box of books that I've never seen yet. I've seen them on a screen, but I haven't seen them in real life. So I'm going to open them up. We'll have a little look. This is the new book, and it's all about the impressive nature of a tiny piece of silicon that we have in all our devices. So here it is. These chips can, and I'm going to read it to you in a minute. This is the story of These Chips Can. Now, this is a storybook that's got science in it. It's a science storybook. It's the tale of a street in Oldham, which is up near Manchester. And we chose the place because it has the same houses as it's had for a very long time. These are really old houses, and yet there are changes over time. And you can observe that. So you're going to be like a scientist today, observe over time. Now, you can't live 80 years in a very short time in the classroom. So we're going to put it into a story so that 80 years passes quite quickly. And I want you to observe the gadgets of the people in the story. So this is Mill Road in Oldham, which is where they make the little chips of These Chips Can. They make them in a factory called Diodes Incorporated, and it's been around for a really long time, for 80 years or more, and it's been changing the way that we live. So as you go through, you'll see pages like this. Now, when you notice the things on this page, you can see there's something that plays music, there's a phone, there's a clock, there's a toy, there's a lamppost, there's a way of attracting attention to the front door, so like a front doorbell or a knocker, a map and some kind of light. So the stories kind of put that all in context, and I'd like you to listen to how their life changes as their gadgets change, and maybe pick out some of the things you see at grandparents' house, and maybe pick out some things your parents had when they were young, and maybe some things that have changed even in your lifetime, because the changes are still going on thanks to little tiny silicon chips. Things are changing all the time. So be scientists, observe over the time that the story is set over, and see how everything has changed and how helpful these little tiny silicon microchips can be. Okay? In this story, you're going to meet several characters, and it jumps about in time a bit, but basically these characters have all lived on the same street. So this one is Bert, and that's a really long time ago, and we see him old as well. So this is Bert when he's older, and he has a new next door neighbour. This is Ash, who joins the street later in time, and Ash tells a story of his childhood, and he tells it to his daughter Sadia. So this is Ash grown up and Sadia when she's little, and we also meet Sadia when she's a bit older, and there's Sadia when she's a bit older talking to Jojo. So it really shows as we go through time how people change, but also how their gadgets change. So watch out for that. These Chips Can. Tell me a story of when you were young, of the time you were naughty, the time you had fun. Did you go to the circus or go to the fair? I want to know all the things you did there. Bert settled down in his chair. He was born and bred around the mills, and he loved a good yarn, a story. Ash settled down on the doorstep to listen. When I was young, the war had just ended, he said. Our playground was the streets. Mr. Hitler stole our fathers and uncles and often our homes, and what he left behind became our kingdom to explore. There were bomb sites everywhere, full of shrapnel and bits and pieces of some poor family's belongings scattered and broken. It was all just sitting there, waiting for someone to find it. One time, me and Billy from number 45, we went off to our favourite site, told our mums we were going fishing, took rods and bucket we found. Soon as we were round corner, we shoved rods behind a wall and went climbing onto rubble. Billy had the eye for it. He found a full tin of biscuits. Some family must have been saving them for a special occasion. They would reach stale, but we ate them anyway. Biscuits were hard to come by. Then we found a length of washing line. Billy and me tried to make a rope swing. We tied a brick to one end and lobbed it over a beam in the roof. I climbed right up into the rafters to tie it on. Then Billy shouts, "Run! Coppers!" The police were coming. I was right up there in the rafters, balancing like a circus act. Couldn't get down quick enough. Of course, Billy'd legged it. I could hear old Arnold, the copper, puffing down the street, blowing on that whistle like a steam train. I jumped down and the floor gave way. I fell right through, scratched myself up proper. but stopped to show off his scars. He rolled up his sleeve and twisted his arm so Ash could see the jagged line that ran down from his elbow. But what was worse, he went on, my ankle had snapped. I heard it go when I landed. It hurt so bad I just sat on the floor and cried my eyes out. I sat there, I don't know how long. I couldn't stand up, so I couldn't get home, and I hadn't a coin for the phone box, even if I could have hobbled that far. Only person who knew I was there were Billy, and he didn't know I was hurt. Billy came back after dark with my dad and a paraffin lamp. When I hadn't turned up for tea, my mam had come looking for Billy. Mam had a way of looking at you that would make a convict confess. Billy told her where we'd been in minutes. Mam didn't scold me then. I was covered in blood and shaky with pain. Maybe she thought I'd suffered enough. But she made it clear I weren't allowed on bomb sites no more. Anyway, they pulled those buildings down soon after. She wouldn't take me to Daisy Nook Fair that year. Said I'd had all the thrills I needed. Couldn't get there with my ankle broken anyway. Billy went. Said he'd been on the swing boats and he brought me back a whirligig. I was pretty miserable. I loved that fair. All the brightly coloured tents and stalls. Before rationing kicked in, you could get toffees and licorice and all kinds of sweets. Only came home when it started getting dark, covered in mud, full of sugar. Best day of the whole year when that fair came. Just have a look at Bert's gadgets. What do you notice about them? Tell me a story of when you were young, of the time you were naughty, of the time you had fun. Did you go to the circus or go to the fair? I want to know all the things you did there. Ash said, a story from here in Oldham or one from back home in Bangladesh. Your best story, Daddy, insisted Sadia, wherever it's from. Ash leaned back in his chair and picked a Polaroid off the mantelpiece. Do you know what a Polaroid is? It's one of those little instant photos. My best adventure was before we came to England. It was 1979. I was 8. My father had just left Bangladesh and it felt as if I'd never see him again. But of course I did. Amma and I, we followed him soon after. It was the rainy season. Rain, 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 all day, all night. But this one day, the rain had stopped. Amma was baking with her sister, your auntie, chatting and laughing and paying no attention to me, so I went out by myself, down to the river. The water was rushing past, twice as wide as the dry season, and there it was, calling my name, the rope swing. The older boys could swing all the way to the other side. I wanted to try it, but Amma always said, you're too young, you'll fall in and drown. What would I do without my little prince? But now, no one was there to tell me no. The swing was fixed up high in a tree that leaned right over the river. The older boys stood on a lower branch and jumped to the swing from there. They were all teenagers with long, lanky arms. I was just 8. As soon as I leaned out to reach the rope, I knew I was in trouble. In I went. That river moved so fast I was way downstream before I could even catch my breath. I screamed, but I was half a mile from home. There was no one to save me, no one to blame but myself. I drifted towards the bank, grabbed at the rushes. Eventually I managed to get out. I remember lying there in the mud, just crying. It was nearly dark. I'd lost my shoes. I had no idea where I was, and I was wet through. I worked out that I should go back upstream towards the rope swing. I walked for so long that evening, eventually I just wore myself out. Too tired to be scared anymore, I found a wide tree branch and balanced myself along it like a jungle cat. I must have slept a little before I was found. A fisherman came past, making his way upstream in a little boat. He was using a torch to check for obstacles in the river when he spotted my red trousers. He picked me up and put me in his boat. He took until dawn to get back. All the way he talked to me about fishing, about his boat, about his son who'd given him the torch that saved me. It was waterproof, so he could use it in the boat and in the rain. He showed me the special rubbery coating. My mother was on the bank by the rope swing. She'd been there all night, clutching one of my shoes. She was furious and deliriously happy all at once. She fried sweet jalebi for that fisherman every week until we came to England. And do you know where we went on my first week in the country? Daisy Nook Fair. I had never seen anything like it. Electric lights everywhere, brighter than Eden Bishwan, and so many colours. It was like a festival to celebrate the little torch that had saved me. And this is the page of gadgets that Ash had when he was young. If you have a look at those, can you see the torch with the special rubbery coating? Can you see how it's changed from when Bert was a kid? Can you see how times have moved on? Tell me a story of when you were young, of the time you were naughty, the time you had fun. Did you go to the circus or go to the fair? I want to know all the things you did there. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll show you pictures. I've got photos of me at Daisy Nook in 2009. When we get home, I'll find them for you, exclaimed Sadia, ducking into a chip. Jojo grinned. Sadia was the best next door neighbour ever. Oh, I'd have been about 11 in 2009. My mates and I went to Daisy Nook for the day. It was the first time we'd been allowed out to the fair on our own. We felt proper grown up, said Sadia, rooting around in the bottom drawer looking for the box of old photos. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I had my best trainers on and a puffer jacket. Brittany had her new pink iPod. She was showing it off. I was so jealous, she said, still rummaging. iPod? What's that? Repeated Jojo, pointing at their eyes. Give your head a wobble. iPod with a little letter I. It was a tiny music player before we had music on phones. Oh, I feel old now. Tech has moved on. Now, where are those photos? Just show me on your phone, Auntie Sadia, said Jojo impatiently. On my phone? Photos? In 2009, she laughed. We couldn't afford a phone that took pictures. Really? I've got one, said Jojo, confused. Give over. Camera phones were new back then. They were still developing the tech, making camera parts small enough to fit inside a phone. Oh, would you look at that? I found the photos and my first phone. Sadia stood up, waving a shiny pink flip phone like a winning ticket at a raffle, and plonked a dog-eared box on the table. Oh, it was the best day ever. Until it wasn't. Sadia smiled, sifting through the pile of photos she'd found. The dodgems were fantastic, with those hooks touching the ceiling, giving off sparks. I even managed to bump Brittany head on. She slammed forwards, her headphones fell off, and her hair combs all fell out. Everyone laughed their heads off. Except Brittany. She wasn't impressed, I could tell. Then we went on the waltzers. It was horrible. We'd had fizzy pop, and I could feel it all spinning round in there. When we got off, I thought I was going to throw up. Brittany started laughing at me. Pretty soon, everyone was laughing. Brittany went off ahead and she found the spinniest, pukiest ride and insisted we all go on it. All the time, she was grinning right at me. So I stormed off into the trees. Stupid thing to do. I was hopeless at finding my way about. But you had your phone. Google Maps, chipped in Jojo, making a face that said, duh. There were no maps, not on my phone. Look at it, said Sally, tossing the phone over to them. The screen is titchy. Does it even light up? Jojo laughed. Well, the screen did. No colours, though, just grey text on a grey background. No torch, no maps, no camera. And there I was, all by myself in the trees at Daisy Nook. It's getting pretty dark. My heart was pounding. I was furious with Brittany, and I had no idea where I was. I did try to go back the way I came, but it was no good. I could hear the music thumping and I tried to follow the sound, but it seemed to come from everywhere. Then I stepped in a boggy bit and I lost one of my trainers. Why didn't you just call your mum? Jojo asked. Have you met my mum? Inquired Sadia, her eyebrows rising. In the end, I came to a river and I just sat down and cried. Then I called Dad, Uncle Ash, and I said I was lost at Daisy Nook and I couldn't find my way home. He was great. Mum would have killed me. Dad just told me to calm down and tell him what I could see around me, and I told him about the river and the trees. And then I realised I was near the rope swing and he said he'd come and find me. And out he came, in his pyjamas and overcoat, with his old rubbery waterproof torch. Phew, was I ever happy to see him. When he saw I'd lost a shoe as well, he laughed his head off and said I was a chip off the old block, because he'd got lost by an old rope swing once and he'd lost a shoe. Of course, you'll never know the terror of being lost like that, will you, Jojo? You've got all the mod cons. Even Bert has a watch that calls an ambulance if he falls over. Bet he wishes he had one of those when he broke his ankle, they said. Oh, you heard that story, did you? Yeah, that's a good one. Hey, I wonder what else they'll fit into a phone by the time you're Bert's age. Chips are shrinking all the time. Shrinking chips? Squeaked Jojo. What? Microchips, like up at Diode's factory. I'll tell you about them, grinned Sadia. Come on, let's fetch old Bert some supper. Phones can't make fish and chips yet, as far as I know. And here is Sadia's childhood gadgets. Have a look, see what's changed. Do you notice anything different? Anything the same? And if you turn the page, in the back of the book, there's some real science, and it tells you about the science from the story. So these are the stories of when they were young. What will you say when your story is done? Sadia says the microchip has changed our lives so much since the time when Bert was a boy. Imagine what it might be like 80 years from now. What is a microchip? It's a tiny circuit. So there's a picture of a microchip. Piece of silicon that's got a circuit that's tiny on it. Now at school, when we make circuits, they look more like this. You'd never fit all of that inside your phone. It'd be too big and clunky. But if you use a circuit on a microchip, they're tiny. So you can fit all kinds of gadgets inside your phone, or each on a tiny microchip. And it also shows you the circuit of a Dodgems, bumper cars. So you can see how that works. So have a look at that in the back of the book. And lastly, here's the pictures from your childhood. What do you notice? Let's have a quick recap. Let's go from Bert's to Ash's to Sadia's to yours and Jojo's. Can you spot the changes? Have you been observing over time? So that's the story of These Chips Can. Little chips that change the world, not big fat potato chips, but little tiny microchips that allow all those gadgets to be part of one device, like your phone or an iPad.